Welcome to the Wisory Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wadler, founder of the Wisory, and this is our weekly Wise in 5, where we ask Fortune 1000 business leaders and esteemed professors 5 questions to provide insights to help grow your business and career. I am honored to host this week's guest, Larry Weber, for this week's Wise in 5. Larry is truly a legend in the marketing, communications, and PR space, where he built Weber Shandwick, the largest PR company in the world, and now leads RacePoint Global. I know you'll enjoy the wisdom around communications, AI, and how technology can be used for good that Larry is about to share. Hi, Larry. Thanks for joining the Wise in 5.
Hi, Jason. How are you today?
Good. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks. So very excited to dive into our 5 questions. But before we do that, I'd love if you'd share a little bit about your amazing journey with our viewers and listeners so they get a sense of just this fantastic ride that you've been on.
Well, it's been well over 4 decades, which is unbelievable to me. I'm mostly known in the public relations world, having founded probably the largest PR firm in the world, Weber Shandwick, and had started loads of other businesses, from one of the first digital agencies, Thunder House, to RacePoint, which is my current company, which does B2B and technology, earned media, and other digital stuff. And I've written 7 books. 3 of them are bestsellers. The other 4 were okay. And I've had a great life working with a lot of innovators and technology leaders, from Steve Jobs to Bill Gates to Tim Berners-Lee. And so it's been fun, and it keeps going. So,
Yeah, pretty incredible. So why don't we dive in? And my first question, which I really ask everyone who joins, is where do you find inspiration just in everyday life?
Well, good question. It depends on the day, I guess. But if it's a real business day, I go back to my mentors, which a lot of the audience might not know, but people like Harry Figge, who really was the pioneer in leverage buyouts and building holding companies. And I got to be his head of advertising and marketing and PR. And I learned quite a bit from him. And then I moved on to Michael Dertouzos, Professor Dertouzos, and he started the Lab for Computer Science at MIT. And he and I would have lunch at least once a month and talk about technology's impact on humanity. And obviously, he was a giant. Bill Gates had a regular call with him every Monday morning. And they had things come out of their lab like voice recognition, HTML, etc. So that was inspiring to me. All the innovators I worked with over the years, the Bakers, who did voice recognition, Steve Jobs, Tim Berners-Lee with HTML. Geez, there's so many, but I loved watching entrepreneurs and innovators that and would never take no for an answer. They just kept evolving and evolving, and that was terrific. And then a lot of people don't know, but on the other side of inspiration is my master's degrees in 20th century British and American literature from Oxford. And I got to meet 2 writers that I wrote dissertations on. One was a British woman named Doris Lessing, who eventually won the Nobel Prize in 2014, I believe, before she passed. And then the other was a Pulitzer Prize winning poet in America who W.H. Auden discovered, Adrienne Rich. And she wrote the famous collection called Diving into the Wreck. So I get inspiration from creativity too. And I guess one of the things that stood out on my first company, the Weber Group, is we had a reputation not just for understanding deep technology, but for being creative about the way we approached telling their stories and building narratives. So the writing part came in sort of handy when I look at it. So those are some of the inspirations,
Pretty incredible. I mean, that's why you're a true Renaissance man, Larry. I mean, you covered a broad spectrum there. So obviously, to what you were just referencing, you were a pioneer really in working with technology companies to elevate their presence through PR and other forms of media, mostly owned and earned media. What patterns do you see that keep getting repeated today, both good and bad, as businesses work to amplify their message?
Well, one pattern that continues that is bad, I'll start with that, is every innovator thinks that they have come up with a brand new revolutionary idea. And that's usually 99% not true. And what real innovation in technology is building on the shoulders of giants. So you evolve from things that have been going for a long time. Take the AI evolution right now. The first paper written on an AI was 1948. So you have to say it's not this latest invention, and how it builds on itself. You have to understand that story and show how it's impacting today and what you've added. By you, I mean the company or the entrepreneur or the innovative engineer, what you've done to change that to make it even more valuable to a business. And I think that's what is not good. So if you understand that, that's good and where you go. The other thing that is good is that most thoughtful marketing and technology people understand that the audiences want to go deep. They want to understand how the technology works. Then once they do, it's like looking at the engine of a car. You trust it, and then you close the hood and you move on. So, and we're in such a fascinating time right now. When you look that, you probably guess that there won't be iPhones or smartphones in 10 years, and it's going to be some kind of AI presence around you.
Just drilled into your brain.
Yeah, well, they probably won't go that far yet. It'll be, they keep the exploration of glasses and of a wearable of some kind is, I think, going to finally get closer to perfection than it has been. So anyway, we were lucky because we were one of the first ones to understand earned media from a deep technology point of view, and how influencers like Forrester and Gideon Gartner and these groups, were really born out to be a third party validator of innovation. And we got that. And I think that's why within 4 years of founding the Weber Group, it was the largest technology PR firm in the world. So
So you just led me to my third question, Larry. So can you share an early challenge you faced as founder of the Weber Group and how you overcame it to build your business?
yeah, the earliest challenge is sort of, it echoes a bit what we were just talking about, was we kept hiring people that were good writers and were understanding of storytelling, but they didn't know deeply electrical or mechanical engineering. So it was a challenge to integrate more of that technology understanding, because the clients at the time were not trained in marketing that much. It was really, they were more engineers looking for help to sell their products. And they also had soft egos because, it was, well, why do we need to spend money on marketing? Because this is just touchscreen. That's just the greatest invention ever. And, we'd have to overcome that and say, no, you've got to build this into a narrative that has impact. It was something we had to overcome. So we would hire engineers that would help, that could also write and communicate. And that helped as we built this area that I always referred to as niches within niches. And by that, I meant not just integrated circuit or semiconductor category, but video integrated circuit and semiconductor, or gaming, or, again, electrical engineering based, power, low power, like ARM came up with to really beat Intel. So that was pretty much what we had to do to overcome. The other thing, which I wish would come back, Jason, is we had to overcome not having enough people that understood technology marketing. And our average retainer had gotten up by 1994. We took no client under $35,000 a month in fees. And those days are long gone. But we couldn't take, the venture capitalists would yell at me. I'd get these phone calls. You've got to take furniture.com, Larry. You've got to. And we go, I don't know. My dog's going to have to work on the account.
Well, that would be good for pets.com, but maybe not furniture.com.
Yeah. But, so it was tough. Obviously there was only about 6 or 7 technology specialty firms in 1995. And then within another 2 years, there was like 300. So,
Wow.
yeah.
You really created a category at that
Yeah,
point.
we did actually. Well, PR, if there's any students of PR, back up till about 1982, 83, it was all generalist. It would be like going to your general practitioner doctor, and he or she would try to solve any of your problems. But, it sounds silly now. Like you have a problem with your foot, you wouldn't go to your general doctor. You'd want to find a podiatrist. Well, that's what was happening in all the professional service categories like law and tax. And, they were getting more specific to vertical applications. And so did PR needed to do that too.
Mhm.
And technology was an obvious leap. And then you saw healthcare quickly behind there, education, politics and government, finance and investor relations. So, but I can't believe that's less than 40 years ago that we started to diversify by deep verticals.
So you mentioned a couple of legends earlier, like Bill Gates. They were launching some of their products and businesses.
Yeah,
I
we
know
launched the Xbox. That was fun.
Yeah, I'm sure that was fun.
Yeah,
Reid Hoffman and a bunch of other legendary leaders like Steve Jobs. What have you seen these great leaders do that make them successful? Like, is there something that you'd say there's a characteristic that they have or a way of operating that just keeps making them successful?
well, Steve was in a category of his own. The first time I saw him speak in 1983 to Lotus Development, one of the first early software companies, and we were going to introduce 123 for the Macintosh. For those who don't know, 123 it was the predecessor to Excel, which was basically an automated spreadsheet. But Steve was like watching a charismatic religious figure that you would just stop and follow him anywhere. So he just had that natural ability to grab your attention and tell a story. And I would remind people, if they have forgotten about Steve, just go look at his introduction to the iPhone in 2007 on YouTube, and you'll see what I mean. But then the other leaders were actually really one thing that I don't think a lot of people recognize is that a lot of great innovators actually were very good observers of human behavior, and they quietly looked at what sort of could make things better from a software point of view, from a semiconductor point of view. And and there were people like Andy Grove, who was a great client, who really was one of the founders of Intel back then. And when we launched the Pentium chip in the 90s, and he would say, Larry, the greatest technology disappears. And that's true. So the best leaders, that doesn't mean it's gone. That means you just don't view it as technology.
Right. It's just
Because,
part of who you are.
right, because I'll tell young people today, and they'll say, oh, AI, AI. And I say, but you know what? You're not going to say AI in a couple of years, because it's like sitting down at a fancy restaurant and the bread is really good. You don't say, wow, the yeast in this bread is just so good.
Well, we don't talk about the digital world versus the analog world anymore,
Yeah.
right? Beginning of the internet, that was always the discussion.
Well, here's one old thing I'll say. You guys have to bear with me, but remember when we used to go, I used to go to my wife, I'm going to go online for a while.
Right.
Well, it'd be like, who would say I'm going online anymore? You just always are online. You don't even say that, so, and I remember Steve Case, when we represented America Online, he would just say, no, we got to tell people to be online, 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 it's like, oh God. So
That's great. We're actually at our last question. I'm going to take a cup of wisdom because I always have a cup of wisdom with you. You mentioned AI, and AI is obviously all around us. I don't think I can have a conversation without someone bringing up AI. But something you reference in your latest book, A New Age of Reason, and if you don't have it, it's available on Amazon, is this theme of technology for good. And so, what does that look like in practice for brands and society? And I'll have a follow up, which is what steps can leaders take to apply that to their business?
well, the best thing to do is to give an example. And I have a long-term client named John Deere, who is one of the 25 largest companies in the world. And you would think, how does a tractor company, use technology for good? Well, the truth is they've been an innovator and a applier of inventions and innovations for decades. And they just happen the last 10 to 15 years really understand that they aren't technically a tractor company, even though they are. They really are in the business of helping farmers have better yields in a sustainable way for the planet. And so you start to bring this filter of using technology for a good result which would be how are we going to feed 2 billion more people by the year 2050? Well, they're going to have to be understanding how to sustainably use AI. They were one of the early acquirers of a large AI company called Blue River Technology in Silicon Valley, $500 million early AI company. But they framed it in doing good and doing better. Look at healthcare. My friend Catherine Moore, who started Da Vinci Systems, she was very worried about the idea that we wouldn't have enough surgeons for just basic surgery work around the world. Well, and they came up with the first robotic surgery, and these arms can do things like there've been 10 million gallbladder removals already, or fix your eyesight in Nigeria, but the surgeon managing the robot is in Columbus, Ohio.
That's incredible.
So those kinds of things, and there's story after story after story. And then to get to the second part of your question, I tell in my book, A New Age of Reason, that you actually need to change up the C-suite and have somebody that is not the CTO, have somebody that's looking at innovation across places that might not be your company that's doing it. You might have to use someone else's, but to use that to give a benefit to humanity by the use of the technology and the products that your company is doing. And I think it's important to do that because ultimately that's going to become the best marketing. You just pull the curtain back and tell that story, so you're not even making up a story. You're actually just showing the truth of how you're working hard to discover innovation wherever it exists so you can get plastic out of the ocean. I mean, last Christmas, my son gave me a pair of recycled ocean plastic swim trunks. Well, hey, those kids that are making those had figured out how to get some of the plastic out of the ocean, and that's great. And they're doing just fine with that business. The swimsuit doesn't fit very well anymore.
Has nothing to do with the plastic, I'm sure.
That's true.
That's great. Well, and something, I mean, against this conversation we're having, I want to thank you because we're so fortunate to have you and Rashad Tabakawala be speaking on September 24th to this new way of working and leadership and what to do in these tectonic changes that are happening all around us.
I can't wait for that to happen. I think it's toward the end of the month, Jason.
September 24th is,
For those that
when we're
don't know,
doing it.
Rashad is a very special thinker and thoughtful man who helped build Publicis, the French holding company of marketing services, and really understands where innovation is going today. It's going to be an exciting conversation because work isn't going back. Work is going to continue to change, and for the better, I think, as AI assistants and agentic AI and predictive AI sort of take away a lot of the dull kinds of things we do every day and let us focus in on the most important things that need to be done.
And I can't believe the two of you have not spoken together on the same stage before. I mean, two legendary Hall of Fame global leaders. That's pretty incredible.
Well, Rashad took the easier route with paid media. I've been in earned media, which is a far more difficult.
Sounds like we're going to have a good conversation.
That's true.
So, my last question, and this is the bonus question. We finished the Wise and Five. Larry, you passed with flying colors. No,
Oh,
no
thank
surprise.
you. Yeah.
As folks engage with you on the Wisery, and thank you for being, an amazing advisor on the Wisery.
Sure.
What advice would you say you're best suited to share with them when they book a session with you on the Wisery?
This will sound sort of funny, and I want to give respect to my colleagues in the consulting business, like McKinsey and Bain and BCG, et cetera. But I think with an hour of discussion, we can find out what business you're really in. And that's what needs to be done before you can truly do impactful storytelling, marketing, earned media, all sorts of engagement with customers. You have to really know. Like I said with John Deere, I must have yelled at them for 2 years saying, you're not a tractor company. Well, they kept trying to ride me out of Moline. And I said, no, you help farmers with better yields. So you could go down the line and take every company. And I would say, give me an hour. I'll ask the right questions and we'll come up with a positioning for you. That's a powerful story. That's what I can do in a short
I
period.
love that. And it's almost like the Malcolm Gladwell blink, right? You do
Yeah,
something 10,000 times and you can come in pretty quickly and identify what the needs are.
you got it, and Malcolm's a good example. I knew him early on, and the tipping point was a powerful story that he would tell me or told me when I had first met him. And then The Outliers was great, and so was Blink. And I haven't listened to his podcast recently, but that was pretty pioneering as well.
They say it's almost as good as the Wise in Five, the Wisory Wise in Five.
I think you're going to surpass Malcolm, that's for
Well,
sure.
thank you. Larry, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for making the time. Look forward
Always
to
make the
seeing you
time.
soon on September 24th with you and Rashad at the roundtable.
Can't wait for that. Thank you. And the Wisery is just such a great idea. Keep it going, Jason. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for being part of it. Thank you for tuning into this week's Wise in Five. Visit thewisery.com to learn more about Larry and book time with him or any one of our acclaimed advisors. Only at the Wisery.